Welcome to the Independent Report. I am Aaron. I am the host of this podcast. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to share with your friends. That'll help grow the channel. That'll help make things better and help us continue to do this. So, I wanted to start a podcast. I had started one before, but it wasn't exactly the way I wanted it to go, and I didn't want to go in that direction. So I started a new idea here. I am doing this as a separate channel. Of course, I have other channels, but I'm not gonna do it on those because that's just going to ruin the algorithm and the whatever. It's just going to ruin the exposure potentiality with those channels. So I'm just not even going to bother with that. But today I wanted to talk about a few topics. Really, what's going on in this country? Politics. We want to talk about politics. Is what we talk about here on the podcast. Politics, technology, and science. Usually the stuff that keeps us going, the future of the world and the current state of politics in this country. Really, we want to talk about, starting out, we have the protests. Now, of course, months ago, there was the killing of George Floyd by the police officers of the Minneapolis Police Department. That in itself was a horrible situation. There's so much wrong with that, but they got the justice. They got them arrested, but so many more people have been harassed, killed, beat up, just tortured by the police in recent months, and no justice has been done. Nothing has changed, and really, we're seeing just the collapse of the country. We're seeing the collapse of this nation, and it's really sad because, in some ways, it's bad. The violence is bad. What's going on in this country is a bad thing, but in other aspects, it's actually kind of good. I mean, the violence is never a good thing, but the way that this country has been run in the ground the past 60, 70 years, and how it hasn't changed much, and how we've just been struggling and nothing is being done to help us, and no one seems to care anymore. Honestly, radical change, crazy change that you wouldn't expect, I think is necessary for this kind of system to be changed and reworked. You have all these things going wrong, and we've tried to vote people in. We've tried to do politics and try to change things, but it's not helping. It's not working. Nobody cares. The government doesn't care. Everyone wants to vote for the same old people. I mean, but no one's doing anything. The Republicans don't want to help. They don't want to do anything. The Democrats certainly don't want to help at all. They have their own. They both sides have their own interests. The one side wants to call the other side stupid, and the other side wants to call the other side socialists. It's like you're either one or the other. But to me, the political parties are both on the same side. There's nothing about them that's different. They're all the same. They just have different agendas, but they all have the same kind of goal, to not really do much. The Republicans don't really care about people. They just want to serve their own self-interests. And then the Democrats pretend to care about people, but really behind the scenes, they're just worrying about their own interests and what benefits them and their supporters or their wealthy donors. So they don't care. No one cares. And we have protests going on in Seattle, Portland. We had one in Washington, D.C., there was some in Philadelphia, Jacksonville, New York City, Los Angeles. I could keep going on. There's Louisville. There's so many, but now we have even more intense and aggressive protests in Portland and Seattle. Now in Portland and Seattle, if you haven't seen the videos, if you haven't seen the news, there's a lot of public outrage. There's a lot of gathering, a massive amount of people gathering. Most of the people there that are gathering are pretty much peaceful. I think that the most part it has been tried to be peaceful. But I mean, at this point, the way things have been going, the way things have been run, and the way our society looks, it just doesn't seem like peace is going to be on the table much longer. I mean, there's people trying to be peaceful, but I mean, at this point, it's just boiling over. You had I think it was yesterday or the day before, they had in Louisville, they had two separate militias. They marched in Louisville, and eventually when you have two sides with guns, open carry in a march, in a protest, it never goes well, because eventually there were shots. Someone got shot and killed um, during that protest. And I think that in this not this situation, this environment, this current year, I think there's a lot of pressure building up, a lot of anger, a lot of division, and I think that Corona just pretty much just made it worse. You had, I mean, it was always bad. I mean, we've always been going through stuff, but coronavirus is just the tipping point. I think it's the iceberg that sinks the ship. It's definitely not a good thing, but things are changing, and people are getting angrier and more aggressive and just tired and fed up with everything. But it's gonna change things, and hopefully things get different and things get better, because what we're seeing is just the total collapse of society. The virus is just opening people's eyes to the fact that the system sucks. The system doesn't work. It doesn't help people. We're all being forced to do things we don't want to do just to survive. We gotta put up with all this stuff, and it's showing the illusion, and it's showing the kind of I guess theatrical performance that is the American society, that we are forced to believe, we are forced to participate in, and it's a lie. We see past this illusion, this lie, and people are waking up to this idea and to this to the truth, really. So you have in Portland and Seattle, people are rioting. Well, not rioting, they're protesting, but they are there. They have a lot of them have gas masks, gloves, umbrellas, homemade riot shields. They even have leaf blowers. People are in Seattle and Portland with leaf blowers, trying to use the tactics of the Hong Kong protesters. Now, if you don't know, the Hong Kong protests are over the Chinese overstepping of their boundaries and reaching for total control of the Hong Kong country. And really, what they do there is just the tactics and the strategies that the protesters use is just it's far beyond the capabilities or the thoughts of our own people, because we haven't really tried to do some of the tactics that they have used, and their tactics are 10 times more effective, and they're actually making a difference and actually making it tough on the government and the police of Hong Kong. So it's good to see in Portland and Seattle people are actually coming up with good ideas and actually borrowing tactics and strategies from the Hong Kong people. It's great to see that, that people have the opportunity to stand back and even push back, because normally in a protest you have the police come in with their rubber bullets, their pepper spray, their hoses and tear gas, and that usually disperses the crowd and ends things. It quickly shuts things down, and then the protest ends up just falling apart, really, in a matter of hours. But with these new tactics and these new strategies, you see that there is more. There's a higher probability of surviving these non-lethal setbacks. You have these strategies and these tactics that are using and borrowing from other countries that are protesting, rioting, and making changes. They're using these tactics and these ideas, and it's actually beneficial for the protests, because the protests can continue to happen. You even saw, I think it was yesterday or the night before, the last night, the protesters ended up taking the police back into the federal judge building in the city. They actually swarmed the police and pushed them back inside the building. Now, the building has a fence around it. It has a fence that is pretty sturdy. And for some reason, the protesters, they keep trying to break it down. They keep trying to destroy it and take it apart, but they never seem to do it. But it seems to me that there's a need from the protesters, a want from the protesters to take down the police and to, scare them off and drive them off, because people are fed up. People are not happy with what they are experiencing, what they're dealing with, and they don't appreciate the police coming in with their riot gear and their non-lethal weapons and their military-grade equipment and sparking and causing chaos and that sort of thing. So you have these people banging up on the fences, trying to destroy stuff, trying to get into it. A lot of people are bleeding. They're pushing them back with leaf blowers, fireworks, and walls of other people. There's just so much chaos in these cities. And that's the reason why these police officers in Seattle and Portland, they have declared these as riots. Now, I wouldn't consider them riots just because there's no real violence or looting as of yet, besides the whole fence thing. I mean, the whole fence thing is pretty much not less important than anything, but they've took that fence issue and they've turned it into a riot and painted the protesters as rioters. And I think that is kind of a weird coincidence, a conspiracy. I think that they're taking that idea or that action of breaking the fence down or trying to break the fence down, turn that into calling them rioters, to paint them as rioters and paint a picture of them as rioters. And essentially, it gives Trump the credibility and the go-ahead to send in Homeland Security agents in unmarked vehicles to go and take people off the streets. Now, if you haven't seen that, Donald Trump is taking people off the streets. That's right. Donald Trump is taking people off the streets through the use of Homeland Security agents dressed in military gear, in unmarked vans, and other vehicles. Now, that doesn't sound like some kind of dystopian Nazi Germany type situation, then I don't know what it would look like other than that, or what it would seem like other than that. You have these people coming in here looking to make change, to make progress, to really push the country forward in a better direction. But then you have the president who is calling every protester a terrorist and treating them as such. You have these protesters who just using leaf blowers, homemade riot shields, umbrellas, fireworks. I mean, pretty non-lethal on their end too. But they're taking those things and they're treating that as terroristic actions. Now, it's not a good idea to call protesters terrorists, to label them as terrorists at all. I think that it's very detrimental to the functioning, or to the society as a whole, by claiming that anyone who's speaking up against injustice is a terrorist, because then that fuels fire in the flames and fuels the engine of revolutions, civil war, those type of actions, those type of scenarios. And if Trump continues to treat people as such and continues to treat people as terrorists to the nation, traitors to the nation, then I think that the only option that I see coming from this whole issue of Trump's handling of these protesters and the handling of justice in this country, I think that what's going to come from this is chaos, civil war, revolution. I really, honestly, and I'm not encouraging it, I'm not endorsing it, but I'm just saying that based off of how Trump is treating people in this country, I do think that in the end, it's going to end up with violence and war between certain parts of our country. We're so divided. We're way more divided than we've ever been. I even think more divided than the original American Civil War against the North and the South. I think we're way more divided than that at this point, even more so. So I think that there's going to come a point where there's just going to be, the bridge is breaking. Think of it like a bridge. We have everything, the country is sitting on this bridge, and it's sturdy. It's got, the support beams. It's got everything needed to stay intact. But what you're seeing here is the erosion of the beams and the support beams. The bridge is made of, you could make it out of steel, iron, any sort of material that is metal. But it's rotting away. It's eroding, and the fact is, the pressure is mounting, and at some point, Trump is going to do something so crazy that it's going to the bridge is going to break, and when the bridge breaks, the country goes into chaos, and that we end up with violence and destruction, which, like I said, is not a good thing, but also could be a good thing. There's always good things about bad things. Not everything is completely bad. There's also good things about the bad things. Good things are hidden away in bad things, and in this case, if there was to be a revolution or a civil war, I think that while it would be totally reckless and totally violent and destructive, I think that in the end the country would end up better than it has been in some way if it was done properly. But I do see inevitably that there's going to be a civil war or some sort of government overstep in Trump's administration, and you see it now that they're doing it with coronavirus. They're trying to get a surveillance system. They're trying to enact policies to keep watch on citizens to make sure that they are not getting sick, which is at this point waste of time. Because you look at the numbers. If this was back in February and March, there was 15 to 100 people that had it. It'd be okay, let's monitor those people. Let's keep them under control. But now you have millions of people infected. Hundreds of thousands are dead. And you think about it like this. There's no point. There's just no point. Because you can't track down every single person that is infected now. It's too much work. It's too much work, too much to go off of, and there's just no way to do it. The government cannot and would not be able to do that if it was even on an option, because there would just be too much resources being spent, too much time taking into trying to track everybody down. You don't even know who has it or who doesn't. You won't get everybody. Someone will slip through the cracks, and then you'll end up with it just getting worse. So there's no point to even bother with trying to control it through surveillance or any other sort of means. There's no way to do it other than just let it happen and just try to keep people practicing the safe precautions and wearing masks and all that stuff. But it's definitely something to think about. The protests going on and how they're classifying it as riots. The police are treating them like terrorists. The president's treating them like terrorists. The president's sending people in to go and drag them off the streets and arrest them. And it's definitely not something that is worth it. It's not something that is worth it in the long run for the president, because if we keep down this path, which we are, I don't see a path where we don't stay down this road. There is an opportunity for destruction, an opportunity for revolution, for riots, for civil wars, whatever you want. That's on the table, and it depends on the right amount. It depends on the right person who's going to lead that, who's going to take that opportunity for violence and revolution, and who's going to take that and run with that and try to push for the destruction of this country, or not of this country, this government, this system. Because, again, the system isn't working for a lot of people. The government isn't working for a lot of people, and some people feel that it would just be better if they just went with violence and destruction and destroyed the entire government from the ground up, or from the top down. Start from the top, go all the way down, just destroy the entire system. And that's what honestly could happen. And, other countries would want that. Russia would want that. North Korea would definitely want that. China would want that, which would lead to invasion. Which, if that's the case, then we're screwed, because when our country's at civil war and at odds with each other, divided and violent, then you have China, Russia, and all these major countries who are against us. They'll take advantage of that, and they'll try to seize power in certain areas of the world and also try to invade us. I think that Russia would take advantage of that opportunity to, do the things that they like to do. They would also try to invade. I can guarantee the Russians would invade from the East Coast or West Coast. Same with China. There would be some sort of invasion, some sort of takeover, and we would be not able to stop it, because most of our military is international. We have most of our military personnel and our soldiers off in different countries, working at different military bases internationally, doing things like that. And if there were an invasion, we would be severely disadvantaged because, well, we could recruit the population to defend the country in such a situation. I just don't see that the ability to train people fast enough without, expediting in such a way that would allow for rapid drafting of the civilian population. And essentially the only other way, if we were in the middle of an invasion, would be just to hand out guns and just be like, just make sure if something happens, try to shoot them, arm the population en masse. But that's another whole situation, another whole topic. But yeah, this is where it starts. If the protests ramp up into full-on riots, which it has in certain cities, but it hasn't. The riots haven't been as effective in most cities. They burn down stuff, they loot stuff, they destroy things, but it hasn't gone more than that. Eventually, when it comes time, I think that there might be people who will seize on the opportunity and try to start a movement to destroy the system, which means killing cops, killing military personnel, killing authority, lawmakers, anybody that they can that is controlling the society or controlling the country. They will try to do anything they can to take those people out, which in turn would cause mass amounts of police. Well, what it would essentially mean is that there would be police shortages. And if there was the case where like police were getting shot, police were getting killed by the protesters, the rioters, the revolutionaries, there would be a shortage of police, a shortage of authority in the cities or the towns or wherever it would be. And then you would see more people rising up, more people with guns, more people taking over, because I think that the main reason why there hasn't been any sort of takeover or any sort of rioting or revolution on a large scale is due to the police itself. The police keep the peace, but only to keep intact the system that it serves. They really honestly wouldn't really protect anything other than federal buildings or government buildings or anything with pertaining to the government itself. You see that in Portland, the police are protecting a federal building in the city. They're not protecting skyscrapers or corporations. They're just protecting the federal buildings because that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to protect the system that allows them to continue to hold power. So you're seeing in these places that there is a clear disconnect between the police and the protesters. The police are coming in with full force, treating them like terrorists, almost looking like, you look at these guys from the Homeland Security, these agents coming in with their military uniforms on, it would almost look like they're ready to go to Afghanistan and go fight in the wars over there in the Middle East. They look like they're being ready to they look like they're getting ready to be shipped off to another country to go fight. Now, looking at that, it doesn't seem like it's a good idea. It doesn't seem like it's clearly not a good idea to have people come in looking like that for protests and peaceful demonstrations. I mean, sure, some protests have gone a little bit rowdy, but they haven't gotten to the point where like literal cities are burning down and everyone is dying. It doesn't get that far yet. It hasn't got that far yet. But to come in there with your military uniforms and your military-grade equipment for people that aren't really being violent, and to shoot them with tear gas, to shoot them with rubber bullets to like hurt them and injure them, that's not a good option, not a good look, because you have these people doing that, and in turn just makes the crowd angry or makes the people angry, or nothing comes of it. Nothing good comes of it, because you have all these people who are just tired of the same old status quo system that we live in, and they want something different, something that works for them, something that works to benefit them, instead of other organizations or other corporations. So if you look at what's happening in Portland, what's happening in Seattle, what's happening in Chicago, there's anti-Trump hate. There's anti-government hate. There's just American hate, because the American country, the government, and the president itself do not have any clear concern for the people. They don't care. They don't want to do anything. It's all playing politics. That's why you see in Congress they have the bills for the stimulus check. They have the bills to help people, but they never get passed because Republicans don't want to do anything about that, because they think that that's stupid. That's a waste of their time. They think that that's socialism. Then the Democrats don't want to do with anything of that because it's not good enough, or they don't think that it's worth it, or they don't want to deal with it, and they just don't even bother. So then they go and they just sit around and call the president stupid or call him dumb and waste our time by just calling the president dumb, stupid, terrible, and that's all they do. That's the Democrats' thing. The Democrats like to just sit around, hate on Trump. The Republicans like to just sit around, hate on Democrats, calling them socialists. Meanwhile, that's not helping the country. That's not helping us as a society, because then you have people who are really struggling, trying to get through things and trying to find a way out, but they can't find a way out because the government just likes to bash each other. They don't even want to work together. They don't even want to try to help the country. They just want to sit there and call each other names, and that's a problem. That's what we're dealing with, and that's why something needs to change. Because the president doesn't care. He's going in with his guys, sending them in, and the protesters are just angry that they're being attacked by these military-grade riot gear wearing police officers. They don't want to deal with that. They don't want that. But the president's trying to stir something up, trying to get things worse, so that way he can in turn turn it around and make himself look like a savior, look like a hero for the government, and look like a hero to the American people, which isn't going to work the way he wants. It's going to backfire, because he's going to, and I was going to talk about this, and I haven't yet, but I'll talk about it now because it's very important, and it pertains to this whole situation. So essentially, Trump wants to make things as bad as possible, so that way he can turn around and do basically the least amount of talking, the least amount of policy making to make it look like he's a hero. Because if the country gets so bad, he thinks that he can just say one little thing or do one little thing, and it'll just change everyone's opinions, and people will be happy, and he'll get all the votes. But that's not what's going to happen. You see, he's going to make things worse and worse and worse, and then eventually there's just going to be violence. People are going to start shooting people. People are going to get out on the streets and start killing everybody else, and it's not going to end up in a very positive way. And what's going to happen, and this is just how I feel, regardless, my opinion. But the president as the position, not the actual president. I'm not referring to the president themselves. I'm just referring to the position. The presidential position in this election is going to be either taken by Biden or kept by Trump. But what I predict and what I think is going to happen, and this is just inevitable. This isn't going to help things. If Biden wins the election, I guarantee that there's going to be hardcore people, definitely far right people, definitely very pro-gun, pro-Trump people that are going to take to the streets, and they're going to go and take back the country. Violence. I think that if Joe Biden wins, Trump isn't going to give up his seat. I highly doubt that he's going to give up his seat willingly. I think he's going to try to make some kind of last-ditch effort to secure his position. And I think that what Trump is going to do is call the election, if he loses, rigged, fake. He's going to call the news media fake for faking the numbers. He's going to call Joe Biden socialist, a fake. He's going to say the Democrats rigged an election and they're stealing the White House and the presidency from me. Which then he's going to take that and call on his supporters to take to the streets and fight back and take back the country. That's what I think he's going to do, because he did it once with the Washington, D.C. riots with the White House. He told his supporters to show up to go and confront the protesters, but nobody showed up. I don't think that anybody really cared to show up, or anyone saw his – well, and I don't think anyone really saw his tweet at the time that he posted. They probably saw it a day after he posted when the riots were when he called for counter protesting, the night that he called for it when it ended. So I think that when that never when he called for the counter protests and that never actually happened, I think that was just because people didn't notice in time. People weren't able to just out of nowhere just pick up and go counter protest. But I think that when it comes to the election, this is the most powerful, intense election that we've seen in recent years. I think that 2016 was just the start. 2016, Trump won and people went out to the streets and they were like kind of getting crazy, but it wasn't too bad. They stopped. It was for like a week they protested and then stopped, and it wasn't nearly as bad. But I think that this time it's very 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 divided, very intense. I think that if Trump wins or Biden wins, that either way there's going to be violence. Because if Trump wins, you have the Democrats, the Democratic side, or the anti-Trump people who won't accept that. They won't accept it because the poll numbers right now are saying that Biden's going to win. They say that Biden has a chance to win this election. They say that he has the upper hand against Trump. But that's not how it was, because you look at in 2016 with Hillary Clinton, it said that she was up by like a ton, almost like 10-1. She was favored. And what ended up happening was, of course, Trump wins. And what happened? People protested. People went out. But in the end of the day, they stopped because it wasn't as serious. They're like, okay, we'll get over it. But because while they hated Trump for what he said on the campaign trail and what he said he was going to do, they didn't know what was going to happen. They didn't know what the country was going to be like 4 years later. So when you look at it like that, when people didn't know, they didn't protest as heavy because they didn't really know what he was going to do. But now that they know what he's capable of and what he's planning on doing, I think that there's going to be way more violence and way more rioting, and way more chaos than there was last time. Because if Trump wins, then the Democrats can't accept that. They can't accept the fact that Trump beat them again, even when the polls said that he was going to lose. They can't accept that, and then they won't accept that because then they'll go out and protest, start violence. They won't handle it because Trump has screwed this country over since his first few months in office. He's done things that shouldn't be done. He said he's going to do things that probably don't need to be done, that are honestly a waste of our time. But here he is now saying he's going to go and take action against these protesters, calling them terrorists. And then the way he handled the coronavirus and how we're now still affected by it. People are still infected. People are still dying from this virus, and the numbers keep rising over time. You look at it like that, and that's something to think about, because his handling of the coronavirus and his handling of the George Floyd protests and the justice protests, the Black Lives Matter protests, he hasn't done a very good job. Meaning, more people are assuming that based on his handling of these events that he will lose. And the polls say that he's here Biden's leading Trump in Arizona at the moment, and he's got a 5% lead. Biden is 50%. Trump is 45%. So it's definitely a lead, but like I said with Hillary and Trump, Hillary had a lead like far greater than Trump, and it didn't work out that way. She got the popular vote, but the Electoral College went with Trump. So it's definitely not something to freak out about, go crazy over, because yes, Biden's winning right now in many states. It doesn't look like that's going to hold because, like I said, and like I've been saying, Trump will find a way to win. Trump fired his campaign staffer, or not campaign, his campaign manager, because he wasn't getting the numbers he wanted. Now he has a new guy who he promoted through the ranks, who is now helping him try to win. And it's probably one of his like last-ditch efforts to try to win and actually have a chance at this election. And I've seen it with ads. I've seen his ads all over the place. He's got ads going around saying that Biden said he's going to defund the police, and it's showing in the ads that that people are being robbed or attacked, and the police aren't able to come to them because there's not much police resources to go around, so they can't all go and help you when you're getting robbed. And then they're really playing it up like Biden doesn't want to put funds into the police, and he doesn't want to actually like help people when they're in need, when they get robbed or when they get attacked. So they're playing those ads like all over. I've seen it numerous times over the past few days, and it hasn't let up. And it looks like he's trying to really paint a picture of Biden being this guy who's going to make criminals have an easier chance to commit crimes, or that the police aren't going to be able to respond to any calls or any disturbances or anything going on. So it's definitely looking like Trump is trying to do anything he can to try to like save his image and try to make himself look like the better candidate. But we'll only know when it comes time to vote in November, because Trump doesn't care Trump doesn't care about anything more than his image. So when it comes time to November, there's going to be as we draw closer to the November election, there's going to be way more ads, both sides. Biden's painting himself as the good guy, the guy we need to turn this country back around, the guy we need to save the country. But Trump is the guy that's painting himself as the one who's going to make the country better or keep making it better, even though the country hasn't gone better. But the problem is, it's not just Trump. You know, you look at what's going on in this country and how people are feeling. Trump says he's going to make it better. Biden says he's going to return it back to the way it should be. But the way it should be is the way that got us Trump. Democrats don't realize this, but the way that we've been running this country for the past 60 to 70 years, that led up to Trump. It didn't lead up to nobody else. It didn't lead up to anything else. We created the system that has pushed people towards Trump. People went towards Trump because they thought he was going to make things better, fix things, make things easier, really make the country a lot better than it should be. But when you look at Democrats and you say, hey, well, we need Biden, we need Hillary, we need somebody to make this country back the way it was. I'm like, well, if you want to go back to the way things were, then you're going to get another Trump in 2024, someone who's even worse, because people are going to just start going more towards the right, to the point where they're going to go well beyond Hitler, well beyond Mussolini, well beyond any of the fascist authoritarian dictators that you've seen. And they're going to push for somebody who is so destructive and so crazy and insane that they'll be seen as the new normal. And it will seem that to the right-leaning Republicans, to the Republican Party, that anyone that's far more right than Trump, someone who's more or authoritarian, that they're what the party needs. So really, you can't sit there and let the country go back to the way it was, because that'll just in turn bring fuel to the fire. That'll pave the way for a very authoritarian far right candidate to come into power. So it's definitely not a good idea that we are even floating around the idea of just returning to the normal, returning to what things used to be, because that's not going to help. You're not going to get to the old ways. Corona was, I think, honestly, you say this about some things, but Corona was definitely a blessing in disguise. I mean, despite the deaths and the people who get infected, but it's shown us, and it's shown the people of our country what is going wrong, and how it's completely an illusion, that everything we're doing is not helping. Nothing's worth it. And no one cares. The corporations don't care about the people. The government doesn't care about the people. It just shows that our country is deeply flawed, and that there is a very clear disconnect between the government and its people. And that's going to show in November, because yes, there's going to be people that vote Trump. There's going to be people that vote Biden. But I think majority of the people are just hoping that Biden's going to do what they want him to do to change the country to be better, which I don't see it happening. Trump or Biden, I don't see any of them making things better or making things work for the people. I think that in reality, the parties don't care. The parties don't care. They're painting up their candidates. Well, the Republican Party is different, because the Republican Party sees Trump, even though Trump's an outsider, Trump's not your typical guy who should be running for president. They see him as the guy who wants to. They welcome him. I mean, in the election, in the primary of 2016, they tried to shut him down and try to push him out to the way. But when he became the clear favorite, the Republican Party just accepted it, and they just allowed him in, and they supported him. But now you're looking in the Democrats' way that there's people out here who are way better, more qualified than anybody else who ran in the Democratic primary, who didn't get the chance, who didn't get the opportunity, because the Democratic Party doesn't like people with fresh new ideas. They like the same old people who want to make them money. And it's sad because the corporate donors, the corporate influencers who come into these candidates and they try to, pay their way to the top and try to get them into the White House so they can start making their profits better or start making them look better for their stocks or whatever it is. That's a problem, because when you have the Republican Party, who we're supposed to hate, they're the ones accepting people with no experience and people with new ideas, people that are making crazy ideas, crazy policies. They're accepting those people over candidates who honestly don't really care to do much. So if you're looking at it that way, who's the real evil here? I mean, yes, the Republican Party is evil because they don't care about people, and yes, the Democratic Party is evil because they don't care about people, but the Republican Party is actually opening up their eyes and their arms to new ideas and to people who are running that have not been in the political system for a long time. But the Democratic Party, of course, chooses the people who have most experience, but the least amount of policies, or the least amount of effective policies, and the least amount of drive to actually make change and fix the country. So really it boils down at the end, with both parties being equally just as bad in certain aspects, who's going to win. And if whoever wins, it's not going to go good for the country, because the country is headed down a bad path in a wrong direction, and we're going to end up seeing violence and destruction at some point. Nothing about this current situation, this current environment screams positivity or screams hope or happiness or anything like that. I can guarantee you there's majority of Americans aren't happy. Nobody's happy doing what they do day to day. Nobody's happy with the way things are going. Nobody's happy just sitting around like worrying about things that's going to happen to them for certain issues. They're just not happy, and I guarantee that most Americans that are living aren't happy with the way things are going. And that's going to translate to violence and destruction if nothing is done. But if you look at it, Biden doesn't want to do much. He even said openly to his donors, his private corporate donors, that he doesn't want to do anything. He wants to make sure that what he does, there's no real change or no fundamental change. It's just going to be basic things. He's just going to run the White House doing barely anything, just so they can keep their profits and keep their money flowing, which is a big problem, because the more wealth these billionaires and these CEOs they collect, the more people get angry and the more people get upset, and it's going to come to violence in the end. Trump's going to win. There's going to be violence. Biden's going to win. And there's going to be violence. It's just the way that it's going to be. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens when somebody wins and how the country reacts. I think it's going to be definitely very violent and very destructive either way. That's just the way that I see it. There's just no other way to see it other than that Trump is going to just cause violence, cause chaos, or Biden's going to cause violence and chaos, because the country is so divided on who they want to pick. And these two candidates, not a lot of people are happy about, no one really likes. But they know that one of the two is going to have to be their choice. And there's people that are going to go to Trump that were originally Democrat. There are Democrats that are going to go. There are Republicans that are going to go to Democrat because they were originally Trump, but now they don't want to be Trump. So it's going to be overlapping of both sides switching sides because of the candidate that they don't like. Because some people are willing to take the chance on Trump just because of Biden and how they don't like what he's done in the past and what he said he's going to do. And there's people that are willing to take a chance on Biden because they don't like what Trump's done or what he says he's going to do in the future. So you got to look at it that way. Really, what's going to happen? I mean, we won't know. Um, not until November pops up and things ultimately happen themselves. So it's really going to be interesting. I'm looking to see what will happen because of whoever chooses what. It's going to be very political, very like highly intense. There's going to be like insane coverage. People are going to be on the edge of their seats waiting to see what happens, like a sports game. It'll be like a Super Bowl, but for politics. Like people are going to be looking at the screens, watching TV, trying to come up with some sort of idea, some sort of way to like keep it going, and they're not even going to. I'm not even sure what they're going to do when either one wins. I just know that no matter what, there's going to be some sort of violence or some sort of destruction, which is not good. The times are changing. They're not looking good. The future doesn't look hopeful. I really think that this is the end of the country as a whole. I think that we've been running on this platform, this system too long, and it's now starting to crack, and it's now starting to break. And this election could seal the fate and could seal the deal. I mean, it really doesn't matter who it is that wins because there's going to be violence either way. You know, you have these far-right militias, these far-right groups, these far-right organizations who are going to not handle this well. They're not going to take Trump's loss with a pat on the back. They're not going to do that. They're going to pull out their weapons, their guns. They're going to go into the streets, and they're just going to start taking things the wrong way. And then we would all have to stay inside, stay away, hide, and just wait for this whole thing to go away. But I don't see it going away. I don't see the violence ending shortly after the election. If there is violence after whoever wins gets elected, I don't see that there would be any sort of violence ending. I think that eventually things will get worse, and we'll get to the point where almost like a purge or like a some sort of situation similar to that. We'll see like a purge type society, not with government sponsored killing, but with anarchy, looting, rioting, violent shooting, killing. I mean, if it gets to the point where people start killing the cops, that's it. Because if you kill more cops than they don't have a police department anymore, and then you can't keep the peace, and then eventually you have unrest, and then people just can't people just won't be able to walk the streets anymore. They'll be dead. The streets will be empty. And also that you'll see that the country itself will just not function correctly, and eventually will break down and fall apart because of the lack of police and the lack of government protection. So that's what's going to happen. That's what's going to end up happening. It's inevitable. I don't see any sort of other outcome other than violence. It's very dark, but I do think that's the only way forward. Because there's no escaping that. I think Trump's going to get very hostile and aggressive and defensive if he loses, which he's going to take the opportunity to try and make things 100 times worse. If the results come in that he wins, then the Democrats are going to not take it well. They're going to go and try to take things on their own hands, try to stop things. But either way, we're screwed. Either way, the country's pretty much done for. Because I don't think the country can take another 4 years of average, moderate, like, candidates. Old guys in suits. They can't take another 4 years of that. And in the end, it's not going to be helpful or very much at all beneficial for the people, because they don't see anyone around. They don't see anyone in government that's willing to help. They don't see anybody that wants to make them, better, makes their lives better. They don't see anyone that is willing to do that, willing to make take that opportunity to do that. So when you look at it in the end, people are just not happy. People are not going to be happy with either choice, and it's going to lead to violence and destruction. And we're all going to be sitting on the sidelines waiting to see what happens. And if it gets to the point where violence is far greater than anything, and people outnumber the police, people outnumber the military on the streets, then you get into the point where it's like violence. If you meet violence with violence, it just makes more violence. So if let's just say if the protesters, after whoever wins this election, the militia, the far right militias, the far right groups, if they go and get violent after Joe Biden wins, or if like the far left militias, the Democratic liberal people start protesting and getting violent, if those people also, if Trump were to win, get violent and get crazy, then you would have to see that the government would have to respond appropriately. Now, if the government doesn't respond appropriately, then this could get out of hand. But then what you're looking at is a very special situation. If it gets too violent and the government responds with non-lethal acts or non-lethal strategies and tactics, they're going to end up losing a lot more people than they would had they just been violent. But then if you look at the government and they decide to let's go march with tanks, let's go march in with drones and start killing our own citizens with drones and tanks, that's going to cause people to just give up and just start fighting. And once that happens, it's just going to spiral out of control, and then eventually the country would fall into the ashes and burn down. And we would be looking it would look pretty terrible from that standpoint. Because then you have people who aren't even a part of that, who sit on the sidelines and say, well, I don't want to be a part of this. And then they won't even bother to attack. They won't even bother to go out and fight because they don't want to be, they're peaceful people. But they'll be stuck inside, holding out, waiting for it all to end. And if that ever does happen, then the country can rebuild and try to make things better. But I do think, and the research does, support these claims that even though you can't predict a revolution or a civil war, the signs seem to point in that direction. The signs that we were given, coronavirus, the Black Lives Matter protests, the George Floyd killing, Breonna Taylor, like all these people who have died, the government not giving any help to people, them not really trying to fight for the people, that's just going to make things worse, and that's just going to in turn create violence and destruction and anger. But that's really what's going to happen, That's what's going to happen in the end. But we all have to just wait and see what happens. We'll have to wait and see what comes out, and we'll have to see what the results are and how people react to that news. Because if it ends up on the election night, Trump goes to his headquarters and speaks to his supporters, people are just going to go out of their houses and start protesting. And if Joe Biden wins and comes out to his headquarters speaking, I think that people on the right are going to go out and start violently protesting to the point where it becomes almost a riot, or not almost a riot, almost a revolution or a civil war. And then, and then the militias are just going to go out too. The far right militias are going to go out and start fighting, start shooting, start taking people out. It's just not going to look good. And the government doesn't care because they're too busy fighting over who's going to give Trump the next nickname, or who's going to make Trump cry, or who's going to make Trump get angry on Twitter. That's what they're all they care about. So they're all blind. They're all paying attention to some other things. So when it comes time to do certain things about these issues, when it comes time for the violence, they will be caught off guard because they don't care, because they think it's a game. They think, oh, if we just wait out the virus, things will go back to normal. Everyone will be happy and it'll be all great. But it's not. It's not going to go back to normal. No one's going to be happy again. We're going to be stuck in this environment of violence and destruction, and people are not going to be happy. But that's just how things are going to go if they end up turning that way. But it's all unpredictable. We won't ever know. We won't ever see what will happen until it actually happens. But like they always say, revolutions and civil wars, they are unpredictable. You don't never know when it's going to happen. It could happen at any moment. at any time of day and any time of the week. There's no cookie cutter like setup for it. There's no set date. There's no set time frame. There's not even a set type of situation. It just happens on its own. So whatever happens could happen between now and November, but I'm guaranteeing that if nothing happens before November, that the results for the election are going to prove, or not prove, but the results from the election are going to decide what happens in our society, and decides what people will do if they decide to get violent. But we've been on that rant for too long. Let's move it over to something at least a little bit less dark. Florida now is the coronavirus, Florida is now number 2 on the highest number of coronavirus cases. They passed up New York. It's not looking good. California has over 440,000 cases. Those are people who are not dead. They're just people that have the infection. New York, though, has the most deaths, obviously. Florida has double-digit cases every day. Each day there's double-digit cases of coronavirus coming in each day, but they have the second most cases. Florida now has 414,511 cases since the coronavirus started, and that's not good. Looking at the governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, that's not looking good for him, because here he is, always on the TV and the news stations talking about doing the dumbest things. Let's go send kids back to school. It's the same as Home Depot. Let's do this. Let's do that. And he's just causing people to die and more people to get infected. And it's not looking good. It's not looking good for him. It's not looking good for us, people who live in Florida. It's not looking good for them too. And in the end, it's just not helpful. People are just going to die. People are going to get infected for no reason because the governor doesn't care. So, what do you do? What happens? There's nothing you can do except just stay away from people. But the governor's trying to send people back to school, trying to get things back into motion, when clearly it's not the time to do that. It's not the time at all to do that. And things are breaking down. People are getting infected. Things are falling apart, and people are dying. And the governors of these states don't seem to care. The Republican governors don't care. That's why their cases are starting to rise. If they haven't already been super high, they're rising slowly but growing fast. You have also, New York, California, they're doing their thing, trying to keep things under control. But definitely Republican governors, Republican states that are not following these rules are definitely growing in cases, growing in deaths. But that's not to say that the people in New York and California are not trying to do the right thing. They're not actually trying to stop it, which they are. But it's not to say that they're also not doing things that they shouldn't be doing. California and New York itself is a whole issue, but California, they're doing things that they probably shouldn't do. Again, it's not every governor, even not every governor is the same. It doesn't matter whose party you belong to. If you just don't know what you're doing, you're just not going to be able to keep up with the infections and the deaths and keep those under control. But that's what's happening. Florida's got more cases now than New York. They become the number 2 state, just before California, with their 440,000 cases. Now, continuing on the coronavirus trend, North Korea locks down their border city because they now have a possible case of coronavirus. The first ever case entered their country, which is in itself kind of incredible to think about, because North Korea is such a isolated country. It's very hard to get into. It's very hard to enter. And the fact that they have a coronavirus case or a potential coronavirus case in their country is something to be worried about, because even them, one of the most isolated countries, no one really gets in, no one really goes out. they have a case now. It's really weird, unless it came from somebody who traveled out of the country that was a government official or something of that kind of situation. They have one. Their city. What city is it? Kaesong near. Oh yeah, Kaesong near South Korean border, as now under total lockdown. He's scrambling. He's freaking out because now he's worried about who's got corona, who's got what, and trying to keep it from infecting their country, because knowing the virus and knowing the way that their country is set up, that virus, if that gets out and spreads, a lot of people are going to die. It's going to be way more than in terms of percentage wise, it's going to be way more than the United States. People are going to die. People are going to get sick. Their conditions aren't great there. Even in the capital city, the conditions aren't even that good, like for most people. So it's going to be very hard for the people because they don't have built up immune systems. They don't have good health care. Their food supply is pretty bad. Their water supply is not good either. They're pretty much a third world country that is pretending to be a first world country. So they're going to look pretty bad in the next coming weeks if that virus is contained, which it might be, but it probably won't be, because knowing any country really that had a coronavirus case, they've grown at least somewhat, and eventually, of course, got rid of all their cases and became free of the virus. But even if you have one, there's no country that had one case and was able to lock down and control that case. They had one, and they grew to maybe, let's say, 100. And they grew to 100, but then they were able to slow it down and drop back down to 0. That's not going to happen with North Korea. They won't just have that one case and just clear it out. I think it's going to just spread because, like I said, their conditions are terrible. Food supply is very bad, and water supply is not good. They don't have the same equal opportunities for utilities or basic necessities as some people in the capital city do, higher up government officials. So the farmers, the people living in these towns and villages around the country who are living in poor conditions, they're going to take the hit, and they're going to die, and they're going to get very sick, and it's not going to help, and they're going to lose a lot of people. And once they lose a lot of people, that's going to not look good for their country, because their country can't survive on a small population at all. Because then it's going to end up being very difficult to recover, and I think that they're going to be weak. If their military gets hit with coronavirus, it's going to really kill their chances at survival as a nation, and then we'll open up doors for invasion, and will allow other countries to invade and take over. And then North Korea will end up taking themselves out of the world, out of the race to become a superpower, and they won't exist anymore. And Kim Jong-un will either get imprisoned or just killed, like some of the other nations that have revolted, who killed their leaders after they captured them. So I don't know if there is an invasion. I wouldn't know if Kim Jong-un would take over or not take over. If there was an invasion, I don't know if Kim Jong-un would be captured and killed or be captured and imprisoned. It's up in the air. But if the coronavirus does hit North Korea, more than just this case, if it comes through the city that's locked down and actually escapes into the neighboring villages and cities, I think that North Korea is going to die. North Korea is going to fall apart, and there's going to be opportunity to invade and take over, because they'll be weak and they won't be as strong, because I guarantee that the North Korean immune systems are very poor. They aren't prepared for certain viruses or certain things, and eventually they'll just die off. And Kim Jong-un is going to be faced with a very dire situation. What do I do? How do I survive? How do I keep this country going without the people to support it? So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how things go for them in the future. Now let's go and take a look here at something very fun. This is not your typical dark topic that we've been talking about so far. You can play now Doom inside Minecraft using a virtual PC. What does that mean? Well, in Minecraft, there's a mod that allows you to build a virtual PC in the game, and you can download and play Doom on it. You can also download Windows 7, Windows XP, an operating system, and it runs exactly like a computer, but inside of Minecraft. But as you know, that with Minecraft, there are limitations, and the game's not built for this kind of thing. But you can do those things with it, although it is laggy on certain programs, certain things that you download onto the virtual Minecraft PC in your mod. But yeah, they've made it. They made a successful mod that now allows you to play Doom on PC on Minecraft. How about that? Virtual PC gaming inside the Minecraft world. It's not perfect. It's not great. It's not even meant to really like supplement your gaming on your PC, but it does provide an interesting and fun experience for that. Now let's move on here. Final two topics, and we'll end it up here. We got John Lewis crosses the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma for the final time. And if you didn't know, in the past few days, John Lewis passed, the civil rights activist, the civil rights leader, the one who participated in numerous sit-ins, marches, protests, anything you can think of. He was there alongside with a lot of other social activists, civil rights activists, anybody. He was there with them doing all kinds of things and changing the world. Now he is sadly he passed about a few days ago this week. I think it was this week. But he there was the like a week or two ago there was on Twitter there was a hoax going around that he was dead, but he clearly was alive. But then, weeks after, it comes out that he in fact did end up dead, not from that moment, but actually weeks later he ended up dying, and it's not something to be happy about. It's definitely very sad that this guy, but he did a lot of things in his career. A lot of activism, a lot of justice, social justice fighting, civil rights work, and trying to make things better. And his time also in the government. He had advanced pancreatic cancer for several months, and on 17th of July, he passed away at the age of 80. Rest in peace to him. It's not good, but, he did a lot of good things. He did a lot of positive fighting to make things better for people. He really tried to make the world a better place, and he did as much as he could in the time that he had. So it's great to see that he was doing that, and actually it's great to see that he was able to do so much in his life, and he did so much, up until his death. But yeah, he's gone from the world. He crossed the bridge for the final time, and he will be missed by a lot of people. I think a lot of people really he was very well liked, and a lot of people really cared about him and respected him. So he'll be gone from the world, but he won't. His actions won't die off. His actions will live on for the future generations. But apart from that sad news, we have one final thing here. Nuclear power plants could be making their way to Mars and the moon. That's right. People are developing Mars and moon nuclear power plants to be placed on those planets for the creation of, I would say, communities, civilizations apart from the Earth. It says here that in Mars and the moon could be the next places for people to live in the next 10 years. I mean, you're talking that's 10 years from now. That's not even that far. Elon Musk said something about how he wants to eventually colonize Mars and put up a colony up there to begin expanding and building upon. So, and NASA's also talking about building on the moon. They're talking about building bases on the moon, research bases on the moon, huts on the moon to live in, places to sit in and live on the moon. And they're going to build that on the moon with NASA. SpaceX wants to go to the Mars and build a community on Mars. And it looks like they're going to have their chance to have sustainable power because they are building nuclear. It says here they're 4 fission-based modular nuclear power stations. They're not full-on nuclear power plants that you see in the United States or in the world today. They're more like miniature, modular, very tiny power plants that, serve the same purpose and the same function as a power plant here on Earth, but at a smaller scale and a more efficient scale. So you're going to have, they're going to try to get the first one by the end of 2026. So these would allow us to live on the Mars planet in the harsh conditions, which would be interesting to see. A community of people living on Mars and the Moon. I think that within the next 5 years, there's going to be definitely be a Mars landing and a moon landing. I just don't know who's going to do it first. I know the Moon's probably going to be NASA, and Mars is probably going to be SpaceX. But it's supposed to give a lot of power. The designs are meant to run for at least 10 years and generate at least 10 kilowatts uninterrupted. But it'll be enough to power a community on Mars or Mars or the Moon, because it's not there's not as many people. Eventually, they're gonna have to step it up and build a more sophisticated system to be able to generate power to the millions of people that might move to Mars. Eventually, one day we'll have millions of people there, and that'd be interesting to see. It would definitely alleviate a lot of the problems on our planet if we said, "Hey, come to Mars if you want and live on Mars or live on the Moon." And a lot of people would choose that, and they would go, and then we would have. And once we colonize these completely, then people can just go onto these planets freely, and they can, explore and live if they choose. So that would help with population control and population sizes. Eventually, though, those would be their own self-sustaining planets where people would end up being born on those planets. Because it would be interesting to see someone who was born, the first person to be born off of the planet of Earth. It'd be interesting to see that at some point. That would be a great step in the direction towards a better future. Let's see. 2 countries launched a mission to Mars. The UAE sent an orbiter, and China sent their own orbiter as well as a lander and a rover. U.S. says they will send another rover to Mars next week. So we are sending more rovers to go explore Mars and see what we can find, which in turn will be interesting to see what we end up coming up with and what we find through these missions, and what we end up coming up with and what we end up seeing. Eventually, the first colonization, the first mission to Mars, will be probably something that we'll be watching on television to launch, and it'll be all over the news. It'll be interesting to watch that too, because I'd be interested to see what happens with our mission to Mars if it goes right. If it goes right, I think that there's going to be more missions, more people going, and they're going to build a colony on that planet and actually establish some sort of civilization there based off of people who have volunteered to move there, like physically, and conduct experiments or just be a research experiment themselves. So it'll be interesting to see how that plans out, how we go from there. But that would be very cool to see. I want to know what I want to see what the future brings, and see if one day you could go to the Moon or go to Mars for like next to nothing and travel there like for a vacation or something. And like if you ever seen the movie Ad Astra, where they had on they showed how that Virgin Galactic had a space not a space program, but a space airline company division, and they would take rockets and they would send people to the Moon, and there was like a moon. It was almost like a moon mall, almost like a terminal on the Moon, like at an airport almost, and it had like food courts. It had like shops, like at a normal airport. Like they had a Subway, they had all kind of McDonald's, they had like all these different shops and all these different things, and it was like a tourist destination. And I wonder if that's going to happen in the future, if we could just go to the Moon and just start touring it and just visiting it and seeing what happens. That'd be cool to see. I would love to go to the Moon or go to Mars and just like be there. like with my own hands and feet and my eyes to see it and experience it like I'm actually there, like I can touch the ground of Mars or the moon and just touch it and just be there. That'd be so cool. I'd love to see that. But, that's not going to be for a few years, at least till they get the first missions going on Mars and the moon, and until we can actually establish an efficient way to build structures that are sustainable and that are able to withstand the conditions. Because I know I saw a documentary that they said that the moon, they want to put a base there. They want to put a couple bases at the moon. I don't know where exactly on the moon, but they said they wanted to put a couple bases, research bases, like places for people to live. But they said that they would have to build it out of the Mars environment, or not Mars, the moon environment. Like they said it would take too much money and cost too much to import materials to build stuff. So they would have to build basically the huts and the living quarters and the buildings out of the rocks and the materials on the ground on the moon. And that's how they would build it, because they would have to do that because of the sun's radiation that exists in space. See, on Earth, we have the opportunity to not have to be affected by the radiation because the atmosphere blocks that radiation and stops it from reaching the civilians or reaching the population of humans on the Earth and, causing damage. I mean, sure, you go outside and you get a sunburn, but if it was there was no atmosphere, we would be dead from the sun's radiation over time. So that's why on the moon they said they had to take these buildings and build them out of something that's cheap and easy to collect, that's at their disposal. So they said they'd have to build these bunkers, these living quarters, these bunkers, these buildings, like deep into the ground, and build like a very thick wall of rock around them, so that when the radiation hits, it doesn't travel through and hit the people inside. It would bounce off that rock and stop it would stop the radiation from being damaging to the humans that go to the moon. So that's going to be a few years down the road. It's going to be a few years away before we even see some type of moon landing again. I know Trump wants to go back to the moon. He says we're going to go back to the moon. We're going to make it a possibility and actually do another mission. So it's great to see that at least something he's doing is going to be beneficial to the human race. So that's all the topics we got. I want to keep doing these. I want to keep doing a podcast every week. Also do short little videos just talking about certain topics real quick and just talking about certain things. Let me know in the comments if you guys have any topics you want me to talk about, anything you want to suggest. I am going to try to get things going with a bunch of different different options, but I'm not going to do that just yet because I need to know if the support is here for these podcasts. I'm going to be sharing these on Twitter and on Reddit and try to get people interested in watching. But this is just the first episode. The branding, I know the branding, the channel branding, the podcast branding, the way that I'm making these videos is going to change over time eventually once I get the support and the equipment. But at this point, this is how it's going to be for now. I hope that you're okay with that and can at least see down the line how it's going to be different, how it's going to change, because eventually I want to do a face cam and eventually have my face in it and have myself in it, so that way it can be more watchable to the YouTube people, and also keep it more audible to the other listeners that I'll try to get on other platforms. But until then, it's going to stick with the audio-only platform, or the audio-only aspect. It's going to stick with that for now. I'm going to try to make up some different designs for the videos to try to keep the videos at least have some kind of information on it and have some kind of stuff that explains things. So I'm going to do these every week podcasts just talking about technology, science, and politics. Stuff that interests me about technology and science and politics as well. So I hope you guys will stick around the channel. I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. This is episode 1 of the Independent Reports, and we'll be back for episode 2. So make sure you guys subscribe. Make sure you guys are sharing the channel with the people you know who are interested in this sort of stuff. And eventually we'll grow to the point where I can start live streaming. I can start live streaming my podcast and start pumping that out, which we can then get feedback from the audience and feedback from the comments in real time. So I can answer your questions. We can talk about things. You can bring up topics and we can chat about it. But until then, this is Aaron from the Independent Reports, and I'll see you in the next episode.